All right, so for part 2 of our notes for 3.5C, it is now putting it all together, okay? So we broke down and took our time to practice identifying holes and asymptotes. That is its own step in part 2, okay? What's new here is identifying your X and Y intercepts, okay? So finding your X and Y intercepts. So to find your X intercept, I'm gonna put a little line here. To find your X-intercept, you're going to take the factors of your numerator and set it equal to 0. That's how we find our X-intercepts.
Did you make a line from step 2?
Yes. To find your Y-intercepts, you're going to plug in 0 for all X's. So wherever there's an X, you're going to plug in a 0. Because we already know how to do step 1, identifying the holes and asymptotes. Step 2 is going to be the new piece. All right, are you ready? So we're going to do step 1 kind of fast. Step 1, identifying your holes and asymptote. This is already fully factored, correct? All right. So then I'm going to check for holes. Are there any holes? No. Now I'm going to check for vertical asymptote. Vertical asymptote depends on the denominator. So I'm going to take X plus 1, set it equal to 0. So where's my vertical asymptote at? X equals -1. I'm going to check for horizontal asymptote. Your horizontal asymptote depends on your degree. Are degrees the same? Yes, degrees are the same. So therefore, it depends on our leading coefficient, and the leading coefficient for both is what? 1. So our horizontal asymptote is at y equals 1. Step 2 is to identify your X and Y intercepts. So we're going to find our X and Y intercepts. To find your X-intercept, you're taking your numerator and setting it equal to 0. So what's X? X equals -3. So our X-intercept is at -3, 0. How do you feel about finding the X-intercept? Good? Yes? Okay. Your Y-intercept. So to find your Y-intercept, it says you're plugging in zeros for all of your X's. So wherever there's a X, it becomes a 0. So we end up with 0 plus 3 over 0 plus 1, which gives us 3 over 1, which equals 3. Because it's a Y-intercept, it's going to be 0, 3. Was it terrible finding X and Y intercepts? All right. Questions over 1 and 2 so far? None? No? Sure? All right. So we're going to do our Y-intercept. We're going to go ahead and put our asymptotes and our points that we have already. So I have a vertical asymptote at X equals -1. I would normally do a dash line, but so that you can see where I'm at, I'm going to highlight it. We have a horizontal asymptote at Y equals 1. Nope, that's reciprocal functions. We have our X-intercept at -3. And we have our Y-intercept at 0.3. So step 3 is to graph what you already have. Check. Step 4 is to create a table to find other values. If you are comfortable with where you're at already, so we have -3, 0, we have 0, 3, and you feel good about sketching it out, you can, but all you're doing is choosing values around here and plugging them in. So we've already did 0. Could I plug in 1? Yeah, so I can find 1. When I'm plugging in 1, that means that wherever X is, I'm plugging in a 1. Does that make sense? So it would become 1 plus 3 over 1 plus 1. What does that give me? 4 over 2, which is 2. So the value at 1 is 2. I go to 1. I'm going to go up to 1, 2. Okay, we're going to choose a point to the left or to the right of this one. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go with -2. It could be any point around them. So as long as it's not your asymptote. Okay, if I plug in -2, I get -2 plus 3 over -2 plus 1. And I get what? -1. So at -2, it goes down to -1. And that's plenty of points. You just need another point to like kind of follow your, help you guide yourself out. Okay, so from here, you should be able to define your domain and your range. Your domain goes from left to right. If I'm going all the way to the left, where do I start? -infinity. And what causes me to stop? My asymptote. So I stop at -1. I continue from -1 to infinity. And this is because X cannot equal -1. On my range, what's going to stop it? Your horizontal asymptote, right? So Y cannot equal 1. So therefore your range is from -infinity to 1, 1 to infinity. Yeah. All right, so that's the full goal of this section, is to be able to do it all. To be able to identify your asymptotes, find your X and Y intercepts, create a graph, and find key points to help you finish out your graph. Okay? What are your questions, comments, or concerns? It can be. It looks like it. But just remember, the math is simple. Just the...
It's like this job, especially with finding like the whole math and so it's like, you have to remember like, oh, you're looking at this part of the equation and then.
Yes.
That's the thing.
I don't have a secret to tell you how. I don't know. I wish I did, but I just remember it. So, all right. So the last part are just for you to practice. Key thing to remember when you're practicing here is that you make sure you use difference of two squares, right? On this one, remember, guys, real quick, you're asking yourself, hey, you're asking yourself what multiplies and what adds to fully factor that, okay? All right.